Hey everyone, welcome to another Isocalm daily tip for helping you to feel calmer and more relaxed during times of isolation. Now this is actually tip 30, so it's probably the last isolation tip and the most important. And it's not just about being in isolation, this is actually one of my biggest tips for life. And this is owning your own shadow. Look, most of us need to understand that we all have a shadow. Essentially, we have two sides of ourselves and we need to bring them into balance. And when we don't, we continuously feel like this in life, like off balance. The best way to think about this is a seesaw. On one side, we basically have our ego, our mask that we present to the world, what's acceptable, what's right, what's good. And then we have our shadow, which is the part of ourselves that is often unconscious, and it's the side of us that we've learnt to sort of shun. The negative side, the things that we shouldn't feel, the bad, what's not appropriate, what's been rejected in the past. And most of the time we tend to push past even looking at that stuff, and we just sort of play into what's acceptable all the time. What happens is, because it's like a seesaw, it's actually like walking around like this all day. And we feel like if we ignore the shadow, that it makes things easier. But in reality, it just makes everything harder, because we all have that. And unless we pay attention to it and bring it into our awareness, then everything in life gets more complicated, more difficult, and things tend to be problematic, but we just don't understand why. Essentially, if we don't pay attention to our shadow, it's going to come out anyway. So we ignore the things that we don't want to look at, and then we end up projecting that onto someone else, or we misdirect that anger that we haven't taken the time to work through. And what happens is we inflict it on other people, and as a result, we lose control over just being able to work through that on our own. Our shadow is always going to show up for us. It's just whether we choose to actually look at it and work through it ourselves, or do we let it come out and it's a reaction and it gets misdirected and causes more pain, guilt, anger, confusion. So the biggest thing is looking at the fact that we all have the shadow, but none of us want to admit that we have it. And this is so painful, because we don't even realize what freedom we have by just looking at it and acknowledging it. Really, it's liberating. It's basically, our shadow is the part of us that it controls what we do anyway. It creates patterns in what we do. And if we don't bring it into awareness, then everything that we do, we don't actually have control over it. So when we acknowledge it's there, we actually gain control over what it is that we're doing, why we're doing certain things, and it's liberating, not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. The more of us that can acknowledge and say, I have these parts of myself and I want to work through them on my own, the more of us that say this, the easier it is to come out and say that I've got a shadow too. I've got all of this stuff. We all have it. And society has kind of encouraged us to just focus on what's right and what's good, and don't show that we're angry or sad or lonely or anxious, and that's something taboo. It's looked at as being that we don't have our shit together if we're admitting that we feel that way. And it's difficult, because really humans are walking contradictions. We are walking contradictions, but we never admit it. Like when we are busy, we constantly want downtime. And then when we have downtime, we want to be busy. Like we're having downtime, but we feel too guilty that we feel like we should be busy. And perhaps this pandemic and coronavirus is the biggest contradiction of all, because in everyday life, we want more time and more energy, and we want this and we want that. And the pandemic gave us this experience of more time and more energy. And what was the first thing that everyone wanted? They wanted to be back to normal. They wanted to be busy. They wanted to be working. We are a contradiction, but we're so afraid to admit that. And it actually creates so much stress in our life, and we don't really recognize it. You know, the hardest thing for me is that I make these videos and I try my hardest to spread the awareness that we are all human and we all experience these things. And I have so many people reach out to me to say, you know, this video spoke to me, this, you know, I felt like you were talking about me, or it's really good. And what I find the hardest and the saddest is that so many people reach out to me, but in private. I don't even know that they've been watching my videos. I have no idea that anything that I do is actually speaking to anyone. And I feel like the reason for this is that we are all avoiding admitting that we have that shadow. What I talk about is often a lot of the shadow stuff that we experience. And there's this feeling of like, oh, I probably shouldn't like that, or I shouldn't make a comment on that because then people will know that I experienced that. And what I want to tell you is that we all experience that, whether we're saying that we do or we don't. But what's true is if we don't put such emphasis on it as it being a bad thing, then we would all feel so liberated. You know, it wouldn't be like, oh, probably shouldn't like that because then people know that I might possibly have experienced some anxiety. You know, we can get rid of all the stigma by just admitting that we are all a walking contradiction. We all have a shadow. We all feel sad, lonely, fearful, scared, angry, confused. Like no one really has it worked out. But we feel such a push to pretend that that's not true, to pretend that we have it all worked out, we know what we're doing. No one has it all together, and that's okay. That's actually okay. What's not okay is when we don't own our shadow, because we're on a seesaw like this, and things become problematic for ourselves and for everyone that we come into contact with. It's actually about recognizing that our shadow work is really just acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we so often deny. And if we choose to bring that into our awareness, then we can work through that without inflicting it on other people. And a big reason why this can be painful is because we think it's going to be scarier than it is. But really, it's just we're acknowledging that every part of us is okay. It's okay to feel like, you know, I'm sad right now. That's okay. What's not okay is when we push past that and we think we can't feel sad or angry. That's when we start inflicting it on other people. And so, guys, my tip number 30 is really to think about this. Bring your shadow into awareness. Start owning your shadow. Start taking responsibility for those things that we usually feel like are not acceptable. Because the more of us that just go, yeah, I don't have everything together. I don't feel amazing all the time. I don't always know what I'm doing is the right thing. The more of us that just go, yeah, hands up, like I feel like that too, then the less stigma that exists around all of these things, all of mental health. You know, we all deal with these things at some level and at some time, and that's okay. We can liberate not only ourselves, but everyone, just by making it commonplace that we have a shadow. Bring it in. Do that inner work. It's about getting that seesaw balanced. And again, we're not always going to get that right. We don't have to be perfect. It's just do we choose to do that consciously? Do we choose to look at why we might be doing some things that we could do better? Is there certain things from our past that are actually making us behave in a certain way? When we consciously bring that in, we then have power over it. We can see that it no longer serves us, and we don't have to say that or do that thing. When we ignore it, our seesaw is off balance, we project a lot of our issues, we feel confused, and it actually perpetuates our stress level. So please, please, please consider looking at what is it that you are shying away from in yourself. What is it that you feel like, I'm the only one that is feeling all of that stuff and I don't want to look at it? Because I guarantee you, if you're feeling like I'm the only one that feels these things, you're not alone. Everyone does. So let's make this commonplace. Let's make this about recognizing that everyone has a shadow. What is liberating is making it conscious, not pushing it out of consciousness and trying to get through life like this. It's harder. You'll feel more stressed. You will have no idea how liberating and freeing and calming it can actually be to bring that into your awareness and to own it. And when you own it, you're going to help so many more people. Even liking a post like this means that maybe 20, 30 extra people see it. And the more people that have just commented on things like this, the more we recognize that we all have these experiences and we don't need to be so worried about it. So yes, this is my final Isocalm tip, but as I said at the beginning, it is probably the most important life tip. And I really, really, really want us to help one another so that it doesn't feel so hard. Please feel free to share this post if you feel like it might help anyone near you, or tag people, or put a thumbs up, or just like the post if you feel like it resonates with you. Let's just break down the barrier of it being an issue that we all have good and bad to us. We all feel good at times and not good at times. That it just is what it is. We need to just stop hiding from the fact that that stuff exists, and life can feel so much more liberating, and we help people in the process. All right, guys, I hope that this has been useful. Like I said, if you want to share and like it, it'd be much appreciated, and you will really be helping others too. And at the end of the day, that is what's most important. So I hope you're all taking care and have a lovely day.